The lighthouse keeper's daily ritual. The lighthouse keeper woke up every day at the same time, 3 hours before sunrise, not because anyone demanded it, not because ships still passed by, not because of any contract, but because the habit was sacred. He'd place his feet on the cold stone floor, slowly pull off the blanket, and walk to the closet where he kept his coat. Each movement, done in silence, felt like a wordless prayer. Lighting the beacon was as simple as it was repetitive, but in his mind, it was like telling the universe, "I'm still here." When the world forgets a ritual, it becomes invisible. But when a single man insists on keeping it alive even by himself, it becomes a symbol. While the storm lashed at the tower's windows, he climbed the spiral stairs, lit the central lamp, checked the lenses, and adjusted the rotation. He did it like someone tending an altar. Somewhere along the way, the lighthouse keeper realized discipline is more than repetition. It's refusing to abandon something. It's memory turned into action. There's no one to see him, no applause, no authority watching over him. Most people don't even remember there's a lighthouse on that cliff, but he remembers, and because of that, he lights it. Stoicism teaches that true worth lies in the act itself, not in the audience. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations for himself, never intending to publish them. Epictetus taught about freedom to people who were enslaved, even with no promise of physical release. That lighthouse keeper, hidden away in a town with no ships, is one of those people. He lights the lamp not because anyone needs to see it, but because he can't stand a world where no one does that anymore. Society sees him as an eccentric old man. Some say he's gone mad. But he knows his sanity lies in the order he keeps within himself. He's lost children, lost his wife, lost the ships, lost his salary, but he hasn't lost the act. The habit is his resistance, his candle against the wind, his inner flame disguised as routine. In Stoic philosophy, they say, a person's character is revealed by what they do when no one's looking. And not only does he do it, he cultivates it, he cares for it, he honors what's invisible. And on nights of fierce rain, when waves threaten to swallow the cliff, he refuses to fail. It's no longer about necessity. It's about loyalty to something that can't really be explained. An invisible code, but one that's firm. Something the ancients might have called virtue. You might think he's living in vain, but ask yourself, what do you do every day even when there's no reward? If there's something like that in you, know this. That's your lighthouse, and keeping it lit might be the most quietly heroic thing you ever do. The rain keeps falling. The light still turns even if no eyes are there to see it. And the lighthouse keeper sleeps in peace because he did what no one asked him to do. And that is enough. Persisting when the world changes without warning. The lighthouse keeper had lived through a war without trenches. He wasn't a soldier. He didn't carry weapons, he wore no medals, but he lost friends. He saw the port empty out. He heard the cries of those who left, and the silence of those who never came back. Back then the lighthouse was vital. Ships depended on its light to avoid smashing against the rocks. Every night he raced up the stairs, heart pounding. Each turn of the beacon was like a call of hope in the darkness. But then everything changed. The war ended. Trade dried up. The port was abandoned. Roads shifted. Modern ships no longer needed the old lighthouse. The world changed without telling him, and he stayed there. People around him said, "You can stop now, old man. It doesn't make sense anymore. Progress is here. The light's no longer needed." But he persisted, not out of stubbornness. He persisted because he understood something few people do. The value of a gesture doesn't vanish just because the world got faster. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor, wrote about it. The universe changes. Life is opinion. But virtue, that doesn't depend on trends. The lighthouse keeper knew the world would keep on spinning, with or without him, but by sticking to his routine, he held on to a kind of loyalty that time can't steal. Every night he went up, lit the light, turned the lenses, even if no one saw it. It was more than persistence. It was a kind of love, a silent pact with something bigger than himself. So many of us fall apart when the world changes, when someone leaves, when we lose a job, when our routine gets interrupted and everything feels pointless. Not the lighthouse keeper. He looked at the emptiness and kept going anyway, because his worth wasn't about the crowd or the utility. It was about staying true to what he decided to be. It's easy to act when everything works. It's hard to keep going when life's tectonic plates shift. The world changed, but he stayed. Not as a rejection of the new, but as an anchor for something you can't buy, measure, or digitize. In Stoicism, we call that attitude ataraxia, the unshakable calm of someone who knows where they're anchored, even when the ocean changes. He didn't light the beacon for ships anymore. He lit it for his own soul. When the world changes without warning, many people run. Others try to keep up, but some remain. They're not stuck in the past, they're roots. They hold on to what's essential while everything else spins. The lighthouse keeper became one of them, a living symbol of steadiness when certainty collapses. And at the end of each night, when the light made its final turn, and he extinguished the lamp with steady hands, he felt whole, because it doesn't matter how many ships came by. What matters is that he stayed true to himself, even when the world didn't. Rain taps on the roof like the fingers of time. Yes, the world turns, but there's something in it that doesn't change, and it's inside us. That's the real lighthouse, and it never goes out. The lighthouse is a symbol of inner duty. No one noticed the lighthouse anymore. Time had erased its importance in the rush of the modern world. GPS, satellites, automated systems, everything faster, more effective, more connected. But for him, the lighthouse keeper, the lighthouse was never just a stone structure. It was a mirror. That tower reaching toward the sky wasn't just architecture. It was a vertical reminder of what it means to live with purpose. The light spinning night after night wasn't just a nautical guide. It was a signal within, an invisible watchtower against forgetting who you are. The lighthouse was something most people no longer understand, a symbol of a duty that doesn't depend on outside eyes. Ever since he was young, he felt something different whenever he looked at the lighthouse. It was like the tower spoke to him saying, "Stand tall and shine, and even when nobody needs it." Duty for him wasn't a burden. It was a quiet honor. A lot of people think duty means obligation, but Stoicism shows the opposite. Duty is coherence. It's the alignment between what you believe and what you do. It's lighting the beacon even when no storm is coming. It's climbing the stairs even with no destination. It's letting the light spin even if nobody looks at the sea. The lighthouse keeper didn't light it because someone told him to. He lit it because that act was part of who he was. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't expect the world to understand your choices. Duty doesn't need witnesses." He knew this. He climbed in silence, took care of the lens, adjusted the fuel, then sat there watching the light go around over an empty sea. And still, he felt peace, because that lighthouse had become his temple. He didn't pray with words. He prayed by being there, by persisting, by focusing on the details nobody else noticed. The world might look at a lighthouse and see a ruin. He saw a moral code. While the world chased goals, likes, numbers, and validation, he kept a lamp burning just for himself. The lighthouse reminded him that the most important light is the one you choose to carry, even in the dark. And there was something deeply spiritual about that. Not religious, but sacred. Every time he put a flame to the wick and saw the first spark glow, he felt something inside click into place. It was like saying to himself, "I'm still who I promised to be." It didn't matter if everything was modern now, or if skeptics mocked him, or if the shipping routes were abandoned. The lighthouse stood, and with it his inner axis. That's what Stoicism calls living by internal principles, a life guided by values rather than circumstances. Epictetus said, "You can lose everything except your choice to live with virtue." The lighthouse keeper was a simple man, but the tower he cared for, the light he maintained, and the silence he embraced were all reflections of what he believed. That lighthouse on that lonely mountain was an extension of his very being, stone and fire shaped by his soul, and each night he lit the lamp, it was like telling the universe, "I'm still standing. I still remember my duty. I still shine, even if no one sees." Rain gently falls, the tower remains upright, and inside the lighthouse a light turns, calm, unwavering, genuine. The night might be long, the sea might be empty, but duty doesn't depend on that, and so the light never goes out. The honor of keeping a promise to yourself. When he was young, the lighthouse keeper made a promise. It wasn't in front of a crowd. It wasn't written on paper, it wasn't sworn in any court. It happened quietly beside his father, also a lighthouse keeper, also a man of few words. There at the top of the tower, looking out at the dark sea, his father said, "The light is just a reflection. What really matters is what you decide never to let go dark inside you." That night, still young, he promised himself he'd never let the lighthouse go dark as long as he had strength, even if the world changed, even if time took everyone away, even if only he remained. It was a small promise in other people's eyes, but huge to the one who made it. Years passed. The city changed. Families moved away. The port closed. Ships fell silent, and the tower disappeared from maps. But he stayed, because a promise you make to yourself carries a different weight. It doesn't need recognition, doesn't need to be remembered by others. It lives in your spirit, like a lighthouse in your chest. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A virtuous man keeps his word, even if he promised only himself." The lighthouse keeper understood this without reading. His language was action, silence, constancy. Every night he climbed those steps, it was like saying, "I'm still standing. I'm still that young man who made a promise to his father. I still remember who I am." When he felt weak, he thought about the commitment, not to the world, but to the silent mission that became his own, never to fail himself. That's rarer than you think. We're surrounded by external goals, deadlines, obligations, societal expectations. But what's most intimate, most stoic, is fulfilling the promise you made to yourself when no one else was around. It's easy to forget, easy to quit, easy to move on to the new and toss aside what seems pointless. But not him. He remembered. So even if his hands shook, even if his knees ached, he climbed. He lit. He turned. He waited. There were nights his body begged for rest, but the promise is never slept. Storms where the light almost went out, but he, with trembling hands, lit it again. It wasn't pride, it was honor. A Stoic doesn't need to conquer the world. He needs to conquer himself and stay true to what he declared essential. Honor doesn't come from trophies. It comes from keeping your word, from what you believe and what you keep burning. And so in that isolated tower, there's more dignity than in many palaces. The lighthouse keeper doesn't need medals. He has his peace, because he kept the hardest promise of all, the one nobody else knew existed. Rain still falls outside, but inside the tower the light shines, not out of need won, but out of loyalty. And that is the noblest kind of light. Silence as the witness of integrity. Silence. It fills the lighthouse now that ships no longer pass. It slides along the stone walls. It lingers between the lighthouse keeper's footsteps. It wraps around each lighting of the flame like a veil. No voices, no radios, no announcements, just silence. Thick, warm, almost sacred. For many, silence is emptiness. For him, it's a witness. Because there's an integrity that doesn't shout, doesn't show off, doesn't justify itself, it just remains. Over time, the lighthouse keeper learned that genuine value doesn't need an audience, integrity doesn't need applause, and silence is often the only witness required. Epictetus said, "Don't talk a lot about what you are, just be it, and let silence confirm it." Each time he climbs the stairs, lights the beacon and sits down, he expects no response, no one to watch, no thanks. The lighthouse isn't a spectacle, it's a conviction. While the world moves on, he stays. While noise grows outside, he holds on to a quiet, steady gesture without needing anyone to see. In that lonely tower, he shows a rare kind of strength, the strength of someone who doesn't need to be seen to be whole. A lot of people live for attention, always adjusting themselves to external validation, hoping for approval, trading identity for attention. But he, the lighthouse keeper, lives in silence, and in that silence, he found something the noisy world forgot: authenticity without a stage. Silence doesn't demand, doesn't compare, doesn't rush. It simply reveals who we are when no one's watching, reveals the real value of our decisions, reveals the depth of a constant gesture, even without an audience. That's why, on the darkest nights, when fog swallows even the glow of the light, he keeps going, because his integrity doesn't depend on visibility. The light turns, the fire burns, and silence watches. And maybe in that silence, there's a kind of peace money can't buy. The peace of knowing you're still who you are, even when the world stopped looking. No applause echoes through the tower. No voices say thank you, but there is presence, and there is light. And sometimes that's all we need. Routine as an antidote to chaos. The world outside moves in spasms. News, alerts, noise, pressure. Every day seems more unpredictable than the last. Certainty evaporates. Routes change. People disappear. And what was solid yesterday turns to smoke today. But in that tower forgotten by time, there is a silent form of resistance. Routine. The lighthouse keeper wakes up at the same hour, wears the same clothes, prepares his tea the same way, climbs the same stairs, lights the same flame, adjusts the same lens, sits on the same bench. He does it every single day, even in the rain, even when the wind howls, even when loneliness feels heavier than his bones, even when no one expects anything of him anymore, because in his quiet way he discovered what many ignore. Routine is an antidote to chaos. Epictetus said, "You can't control the wind, only adjust your sails." The lighthouse keeper understood. You can't control the world, but you can keep a center of order within yourself. His routine isn't a prison, it's freedom. Freedom from external confusion, freedom from fluctuating emotions, freedom from the shifting opinions of others. While everything else changes, he remains steady. And that steadiness is precisely what gives him direction. When his mind wants to wander, he climbs. When sadness creeps in, he lights. When doubt tries to sneak in, he adjusts the lens. Routine is more than comfort. It's a symbolic structure. It's the body's way of telling the soul there's still a path, a track he built himself, still there in the dark. In Stoicism, we don't look for predictability in the world. We look for steadiness within ourselves. And nothing builds that steadiness better than a deliberate repetition of meaningful actions. The lighthouse keeper doesn't repeat out of inertia. He repeats out of devotion. Each day, he answers the chaos with a simple gesture. I'm still here. That answer, sustained for years, has shaped his spirit. It's calmed his gaze, steadied his heart, cleared his conscience. His routine protected him, not from the world but from himself. Trying to shield yourself from the world is an illusion. Protecting yourself from your own despair, now that's Stoicism. Rain still falls, but inside, the lighthouse keeper repeats his steps. And in doing so, he shows us, without realizing, that repetition can be healing. That routine is meditation in motion, the importance of small repeated actions. There's a certain greatness that doesn't show up in heroic feats. You won't find it in fiery speeches or in grand decisions. That greatness lives in the small things, Done consistently, done calmly, done without an audience. The lighthouse keeper knew this. That's why he did everything with a kind of quiet reverence. Lighting the lamp, checking the oil, adjusting the rotation speed of the lens, closing the east window, sitting down, waiting, watching the sea, listening to the sound of the light turning like an ancient clock. None of it was grand, but it was essential, because what shapes a soul isn't a single burst of intensity. It's what you do over and over with intention. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You become what you practice. What you nurture grows. What you neglect withers." The lighthouse keeper was, at heart, a cultivator of small gestures. In a world obsessed with spectacle, he chose the liturgy of the simple. There's a deep humility in that, like the act of watering a plant every day, or writing in a diary no one will ever read, or making the same morning tea the same way for 40 years. Those everyday gestures build identity. They anchor you. They shape time. They remind your body there's still a possible structure within all the uncertainty. The lighthouse keeper repeated them, not out of stubbornness, but out of wisdom, knowing that the simple done consistently becomes sacred. The ancient Stoics called this praxis, the daily practice of living according to your principles. Epictetus said there's no point studying philosophy if your everyday actions don't reflect what you've learned. And every gesture of the lighthouse keeper, though wordless, was philosophy in motion. It was like he was saying, "I don't explain, I do, eh? And by doing I stay." The world chases what's new, but the lighthouse keeper knew there's a beauty only revealed through repetition, a depth that only emerges in daily life. So he never ignored the details. Each little action was a foundational stone for his soul, and by repeating, he kept himself whole. The light turns, the rain falls, and he repeats once more. Not because he has to, but because he's faithful to the small. And in the end, that's what builds the eternal. The idea of being the last guardian of something nobody values. Anymore, some traditions don't die. They just go into hiding. And sometimes the only thing standing between forgetting and preserving is one person. Just one, a last guardian. The lighthouse keeper never felt special. He didn't see himself as a hero, but he knew in his quiet way that he was the last link in an ancient chain, the last sentinel of a practice that was no longer useful, yet still sacred. Being the last is a lonely burden. No colleagues, no successors, no ceremony, just awareness. He knew that if he stopped, nothing outward would happen. No ships would crash, no one would die, but something invisible would be lost. That invisible thread of continuity, the line connecting past to present, the flame passed down from hand to hand, and now it was his. In Stoicism, we don't seek literal immortality. We seek moral coherence, a sense that transcends trends. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Act as though you're the last one who can do what you do, and do it well." The lighthouse keeper lived that way, like the last monk in a submerged temple, protecting something the world had deemed irrelevant, but that he still found precious. That kept him awake, kept him whole. Being the last guardian feels like holding a torch in a cave no one else enters. Knowing the darkness only stays away because you haven't let the light die. There's greatness in that, and loneliness too. But he accepted it because he understood that some values only survive if someone decides to keep them alive without any reward. He didn't need people to understand. He didn't need them to agree. All he needed was to know, as long as I'm here, this won't be forgotten. And maybe that knowledge is why he climbs every night. Despite the tiredness, the age, the invisibility, the tower is still alive because he is still faithful. And that silent fidelity, without any need for payback, is the core of Stoic philosophy. Yes, he's the last, but as long as he's there, it won't be the end. The rain falls steadily. The light sweeps across the darkness as a reminder. And the last guardian remains at his post, because even if nobody else values it, he still remembers why he started, and that memory is enough. The relationship between discipline and freedom. Some people see discipline as a cage, a limitation, something that takes away your freedom. But the lighthouse keeper, in his quiet way, shows the opposite. Because he's learned that discipline doesn't imprison you. Discipline sets you free. While the world drifts between desires, distractions, and impulses, he lives with clarity. He knows what needs doing. He knows when. He knows how. And that predictability, so scorned by many, is his freedom. He doesn't wake up wondering, what do I do now? He doesn't rely on how he feels at any given moment. He doesn't need a surge of motivation. He has what Stoicism calls self-mastery. Epictetus said, freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's not being a slave to what you feel. And discipline is precisely that, a shield against inner fluctuations, a wall against emotional instability, a solid road in an ever-sinking terrain. Each night the lighthouse keeper climbs those stairs with the same steps, and each step, repeated with intention, is an act of liberation. He doesn't depend on motivation, doesn't need applause, doesn't need to be inspired. He just does it. And that steady, deliberate commitment has shaped in him a serenity people who chase freedom by whim will never know. Because there are two kinds of freedom. The freedom of doing whatever you want. The freedom of not bowing to what you don't need. The first is led by impulse. The second, by purpose. The lighthouse keeper is free, not because he does what he feels like, but because he wants what he's chosen to do. That's mature freedom, a vertical kind of freedom. Freedom that doesn't need bursts of excitement or applause or a break from itself. Many people fight against routines. He nurtures his like an ancient song only he still remembers. Repeating it makes him lighter, cleaner, more aligned. He's just an ordinary man. But behind his simple gestures there's a solid inner architecture, and that structure is built on discipline. Discipline in waking up, discipline in action, discipline in thought. Not as rigid duty, but as an art form. Like every act is a note in an invisible melody only he can hear, and he keeps on playing anyway. Rain doesn't fail. The lighthouse light turns, and the keeper walks, free, calm, complete, because a disciplined man carries within him an ordered universe. And someone who has that isn't a slave to anything, doing the right thing without recognition. There's something profoundly rare about doing what's right when no one's watching, when there's no applause, no feedback, no reward whatsoever. The lighthouse keeper does that every night. He climbs the stairs, lights the beacon, adjusts the lenses, and no one knows. No one thanks him. No one comments. Still he keeps going, because he doesn't act for recognition. He acts out of integrity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you find it hard to get out of bed, remember, rising and acting according to your nature is what you were made to do. His nature is to shine light, even in oblivion, even when nobody's paying attention. He understands that what truly defines a person isn't what they do in the spotlight. It's what they do when no one's watching. He doesn't need validation because his motivation is rooted in something deeper, the conviction that there is a silent good, and that's enough." In the modern world, people do a lot of things just to get a reaction. Likes, follows, applause, credit. But the lighthouse keeper, he tends the unseen. Each night he lights that beacon as a reminder that value doesn't vanish when the audience is gone. Actually, that's when real value shows up. In Stoicism, this is called arete, moral excellence, doing what's right because it's right, not out of fear, not for a prize, but out of sincerity to who you've chosen to be. And that's exactly what he does. No audience, no fanfare, no need to be remembered. He just does his duty. And in that quiet act, there's a strength few will understand. But deep down, everyone wishes they had, because the peace that comes from that is unbreakable. The world might applaud you today and forget you tomorrow, but the lighthouse keeper lights his beacon with the same steady hand every single day. Even if nobody says a thing, even if time passes, even if history fails to record it, he knows the light is on. He didn't fail himself. Night is dark, the sea is quiet. The lighthouse shines, not out of need, but because someone chose to keep it burning. And that is more than enough. What remains when everything else goes away? Time is a discreet thief. It takes people, takes habits, takes roots, takes functions, even takes the names of things. The city around the lighthouse slowly faded away. First the fishermen, then the traders, then the tourists, then the port, and finally even the maps forgot it. Over time, even memories started to evaporate, but he stayed. Not only did he remain physically, he kept lighting the beacon. Most people ask why. If everything that justified that gesture is gone, if no one depends on it, if the original purpose is lost, why keep going? Because the lighthouse keeper knows something few grasp. Some things outlast time, and those are the ones that really matter. Marcus Aurelius said, "What aligns with reason endures. What doesn't dissolves with time." Everything around him dissolved, but the reason he lights the beacon still stands. Because the motive behind his gesture was never purely external. It was an inner decision. It was loyalty to something he once chose as good, a memory of a promise, a silent coherence with the man he became, and that isn't stolen by time. The lighthouse keeper is living proof of a Stoic truth. Anything based on circumstance eventually fades, but what's born of virtue remains. His body aged, his back hurts, his eyesight's weaker, but his presence in that tower is as firm as ever, because there's a structure that grows stronger as everything else falls, a disciplined spirit. He lost almost everything, but he never lost his sense of direction, nor his inner flame, nor his quiet clarity, nor the peace of knowing that alone he still does what must be done. That's the heart of Stoicism, telling the difference between what can be taken from you and what can't. They could take the roots, the ships, the people, the job. They couldn't take away what he does out of deep personal choice, out of ethical resolve, out of silent love for who he is when everything else has gone. The tower is empty, but it's not abandoned, because he's still there. And even if the world forgets everything, he'll keep climbing, keep lighting, keep saying without words, "I'm still here. I still remember. I'm still me." Because what's born of conscience doesn't die with time. The light as a metaphor for Stoic values. The light spinning at the top of the lighthouse isn't just a technical instrument. It's not just functional. It's not just memory. It is symbolic. Over time, the lighthouse keeper realized that every night he lit that lamp, he was reflecting something he carried inside. That outward light was just the echo of an inner flame, and that echo had a name: virtue. In Stoicism, virtue isn't moralistic, it's clarity in action. It's the resolve to live by your values, even when the world is dark. And the lighthouse keeper understood. The light that refuses to go out represents the quiet courage of someone who chooses to do good without being seen. Epictetus said, "If what you do is virtuous, keep doing it, even if nobody sees or understands." That spinning light was his integrity, turning slowly, constantly, calmly. It didn't need to prove it was useful. Its presence was enough, because it stood for something bigger, his commitment to what's right. In Stoic thinking, good isn't some abstract idea. It's a practice, the thing you do over and over with intention, the thing you hold on to even when everything else cracks. The lighthouse keeper didn't light it to illuminate the sea. He lit it so the darkness inside wouldn't take over. The lighthouse might be useless to passing ships now, but it was essential to his soul. Every night was a battle, between weariness and duty, between discouragement and action, between abandonment and choice. And each time the light came on, it was like saying, "There's still order, there's still meaning, there's still direction." That steady light was his answer to chaos, his refusal to accept ethical collapse, his way of reminding himself what truly matters. High in the tower, the lamp burned not out of necessity, but out of fidelity. That's what Stoics call arete, excellence of the soul. Not technical excellence or financial success, but the excellence of being present and upright. The light spinning is a soul that doesn't give in. Outside the night goes on, inside the keeper watches, and the light sweeps the dark sky like an ancient gesture, a silent promise, a reminder that something shines even when the world sleeps, and as long as he's there, that light will never die. Keeping the light on, even when no one sails anymore. It's been years since any ship passed that way, Routes changed, navigation systems evolved, the sea got quieter, and the lighthouse more forgotten. Yet every night without fail the keeper climbs up, turns the key, lights the lamp, adjusts the lenses, watches the rotation begin, and sees the beam cut through the darkness. No one depends on it anymore, no one steers by it. But still, he continues, because he doesn't light it for other people. He lights it because it's the act that keeps him whole. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A noble person stays the course, even when others are no longer looking." This gesture is his axis, his pillar, his quiet prayer. Lighting the beacon when no ships come by is his way of proving he doesn't need usefulness to justify his virtue. Our world is obsessed with functionality, performance, results, but the lighthouse keeper, he cares about meaning. He lights it because the beacon is a symbol of continuity, of coherence, of persistence. He lights it so he won't fade away in disuse, so he won't drift into oblivion, so he remembers that he still is, even if nobody needs him, and that's precisely why his action is pure. In Stoicism, that's the essence of self-sufficiency, acting without depending on the world's response. Epictetus said, "Do the right thing like a good actor who performs even after the audience has gone." The lighthouse keeper lives by that. The world has stopped sailing, but he hasn't stopped being himself. And that, maybe above all else, gives him peace. Rain continues to fall. The tower is cold, but the light turns, slow and steady. It may no longer guide ships, but it's a living memory, a faithful beam shining out of sheer devotion. And even if the sea is empty, the keeper knows some things deserve to go on, even if no one sails them anymore. The difference between hope and illusion. A lot of people mistake hope for fantasy. They think hope means wanting the world to bend to their wishes, longing for things to go back to how they were, or that if they just keep at it, life will reward them with miracles. But the lighthouse keeper knows that's illusion, because real hope isn't expecting the world to change. It's expecting yourself to remain. Illusion creates unrealistic expectations. Hope fosters resilience. Illusion sets you up for frustration. Hope cultivates the ability to keep going, and that's what he chose every night, to hope with his feet on the ground. He didn't hope for the ship's return. He didn't hope for applause. He didn't hope the lighthouse would be needed again. He only hoped one thing from himself: fidelity to what he believed in. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept whatever comes as part of fate, but act like you choose it." The lighthouse keeper's hope wasn't passive. It was a posture. He knew the world owes him nothing. Life doesn't have to explain the emptiness, but he can keep lighting, and that's enough. In Stoicism, hope is what you maintain inside, not what you demand from the universe. Epictetus said, "Don't wish things happen the way you want. Wish they happen the way they do, and you'll find peace." Illusion would have made him quit everything, wait for recognition, or demand meaning. Hope, on the other hand, helped him stay strong, quiet, constant. He didn't need the lighthouse to be useful again. He just needed to remember why he'd chosen it in the first place. Hope in this sense was spiritual discipline, a choice to keep lighting even when nothing outside changes. even when it might all seem pointless, because maybe that's the point, to keep lighting when there's no guarantee of anything. The rain doesn't promise sunshine, the sea doesn't promise ships, the tower doesn't promise fame, but the keeper doesn't need those promises. He has the only one that matters, the one he made to himself, and that he honors in silence with hope, but never illusion, when the action matters more than the outcome. We live in a time where everything is measured by results. How much did you make? How many people saw it? What was the impact? What did you get out of it? But the lighthouse keeper never measured things that way. For him, the true value was in doing, not in what it led to. Every night he climbed the tower, lit the lamp, spun the lens, sat in silence. He didn't know if anyone would see, didn't know if that light reached some distant window, didn't know if the sea beyond received that beam, but he still did it, because he'd promised himself he would. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Love the work you've been given. Do it with love and precision, as if the whole world depended on it." The world doesn't depend on this lighthouse anymore, but his spirit does. That's enough. In Stoicism, virtue lies in the deliberate act, not in the result. The result is outside our control, but the decision is ours. Epictetus said, "You can't control what comes next, but you can control if you act with courage, justice, self-control, and wisdom." The lighthouse keeper lives that truth. He lights, not to save anyone, but so he doesn't forget himself. While the world demands performance, he values presence. While the world demands returns, he offers constancy. And there's a deep freedom in that, doing it because it's right, whether or not it works. Doing it because it expresses who you chose to be. Doing it because even if the universe is silent, you stay true. That's the core of Stoic virtue. It's also the root of inner peace, the peace that doesn't depend on results, the peace that appears only when you act with a clean intention. The tower might be dark on the outside, the sea is empty, but inside there is light. Because someone realized that lighting the lamp can matter more than who sees the glow, and in that act is everything that counts. The wisdom of not expecting anything in return. There's a wisdom that doesn't shout, doesn't perform, doesn't show up in success manuals. It's the wisdom of doing and not expecting anything back. The lighthouse keeper knows it well. He lives by it every day. No one thanks him anymore. No one sends letters. No one checks if he's still there. Yet he keeps going, lighting the lamp, adjusting the rotation, and checking the horizon. Not for recognition, not for feedback, but by choice. Epictetus said, "Do your duty, and don't worry about what happens afterward." That's real freedom. Expecting something in return makes you a prisoner, tied to others' reactions, hungry for applause, restless if you don't get it. But the lighthouse keeper isn't tied to that. He's fulfilled in the gesture itself. That's the highest level of moral independence. In Stoicism, that's called virtuous action, without desire for reward. Doing good because it is good, period. Marcus Aurelius emphasized, "The reward for a good deed is having done it." Those words echo every night in the lighthouse keeper's mind. He doesn't light the beacon for anyone else's sake. He does it because it aligns him with himself. That light spinning over the sea doesn't wait for eyes. It just completes its cycle. By doing so, it exists in its fullest form. Likewise, the keeper, by fulfilling his ritual without waiting for something in return, he exists fully, free from anxiety and frustration. He no longer lives in expectation. He lives in the now, and that's why he sleeps in peace, not even knowing if anyone saw the light, not knowing if it made any difference, because he knows the act itself was the value, the movement itself was the reward. Outside rain is steady, night passes slowly, the light spins. He does not wait. He simply lights, and by lighting he completes, without asking for anything. That is true wisdom, the symbolic function of being a pillar for others. The lighthouse keeper never claimed to be an example, never called himself a guide, never asked anyone to watch him, but unintentionally he became a pillar, someone who quietly supports something for others. In that nearly empty village there are children who see the light spinning and feel reassured, adults who, even in silence, feel less lost knowing the beacon is still shining. Travelers who don't know his name but get emotional seeing a solitary tower carrying on. He's a pillar, even if he doesn't notice or want it, even if he doesn't know how important it is. In Stoicism, we don't seek to be leaders, but when we live with coherence, we inevitably become a light for someone else. Epictetus said, "Give an example, even if no one follows. Someone is always watching what is upright." And whether he realizes it or not, there's a kind of symbolic responsibility in that. Pillars don't just hold up structures, they hold up memories, culture, the idea that something can still endure. That's what he does, a living anchor against the tide of abandonment, a silent reminder that one person's presence can affect many without a word. Being a pillar isn't about carrying the world on your shoulders. It's providing a fixed point so others remember it's possible not to collapse. That's what he does. Every night, his whole life. No need for people to know his name, no tribute for his steadiness, no plaque declaring him a hero. He's a pillar because he hasn't fallen down. And in these days of moral and spiritual collapse, that's rarer than gold. The rain continues. The tower windows drip and inside someone sits, quiet, firm, present. He doesn't call himself a pillar, but he is one. And because of that, many sleep more peacefully, even if they don't know why. Keeping something that's no longer useful, but still sacred time labels some things obsolete. They lose their function, stop serving, aren't practical, profitable, or up to date anymore. But not everything that loses its utility loses its value. The lighthouse keeper knows this. The lighthouse no longer guides ships. The tower isn't needed. The stairs creak. The lamp is analog. The oil is outdated. The structure is old-fashioned. Yet he still climbs, still cares for it, still cleans, still lights. Because for him, it stopped being a tool and became a temple. He understands that some objects, places, and practices don't have to work anymore to be worth reverence. In Stoicism, something is sacred if it represents a deeper value, not just because it's useful. Marcus Aurelius wrote, Show reverence to whatever silently sustains you. The lighthouse keeper maintains the lighthouse because it stands for something no one should discard just because it's not useful anymore. It stands for memory, commitment, stability, silence, a promise, a presence. It represents a world where people took care of important things, even if time passed them by, and to him, that's sacred. Epictetus said, "Never neglect what connects you to your soul, even if the world doesn't see why you still keep it." That's what he does. He guards it, he maintains it, he protects it. Not out of necessity, but out of an understanding that some things, even if they're out of use, are still worthy. And that worthiness is rare. It's resistance. It's a symbol. In times when everything's quickly discarded, replaced and measured by productivity, the lighthouse keeper remembers there are things you just don't abandon, even if nobody else sees a point. Because sometimes what you preserve but also preserves you. Yes, the tower is no longer on the map. The lamp isn't consulted, but he remains. Because what he preserves isn't just a lighthouse, it's a value. And certain values, even when outdated, are still sacred. The Stoic as an inner sentinel. The lighthouse keeper doesn't go to bed early. He stands guard. Even when everyone else is asleep, even when there's no danger, even when no one's watching, he's not just standing guard for the outer world, he's doing it for his inner world. In Stoicism, there's a silent function, the inner sentinel, someone who watches not what's happening outside, but what's happening inside himself, not the waves at sea, but the currents of his own emotions. Not external threats, but the subtle slips in character. Epictetus said, "You are your own guardian. Watch over yourself like a faithful soldier on duty." That's how the lighthouse keeper lives. Every night, climbing those stairs, he's moving not just through levels of a tower, but through states of mind. Yes, he watches the world outside, but more importantly, he watches himself. That's the real job of a Stoic, to be a person of inward focus, a guardian of one's thoughts, a sentinel of impulses, a caretaker of the spirit. The beacon is symbolic, but the true light is inside him. He refuses to let it dim when discouragement creeps in, when his mind is tired, when emptiness feels overwhelming. He sits there as always in the dark, not to control what comes, but to stay true to who he is. Being a sentinel means standing guard over the invisible boundaries of the soul, keeping awake what most let fall asleep. Awareness, discernment, uprightness, lucid stillness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The mind of a watchful person is like a tower looking in every direction. No emotion slips in without being seen. The keeper is that tower, tall, quiet, free from noise, filled with presence. In that watchfulness, he stays whole." Being Stoic isn't about being cold, it's about being alert, maintaining that awareness of what truly matters, being the unseen soldier of an inner realm that refuses to crumble. Outside, the wind howls, rain soaks the tower walls, but inside there's a man who's awake, not out of obligation, but by choice, because there are days when the world doesn't demand anything from you, but your conscience still does. And that's why he keeps watch. Rain as a metaphor for time, light as presence. Rain has no rush. It falls like time, steady, relentless, impartial. It doesn't choose where to land. It just lands. The lighthouse keeper has learned to listen to it. In the tower's stillness, he senses the rain isn't just falling from the sky. It's marking time. Every raindrop is like the tick of a clock without hands. Every storm cycle is a reminder. Time passes whether you like it or not. And like the rain, time can't be controlled, only accepted. In Stoicism, time is one of our greatest teachers. We don't fight it, we don't try to hurry it. We accept its flow and act with presence within it. That's exactly what the lighthouse keeper does. He doesn't try to stop the rain, doesn't complain about gray skies. He just climbs, lights, and sets a lamp in the midst of time. Because if rain is time, then light is the clear awareness in the midst of it. It's the decision to stay awake, to not get swept away by the indifferent passage of hours, to mark with fire and constancy a fixed point in what's constantly moving. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We live only this moment. All else is either past or not yet. So be whole now." The lighthouse light is that whole now. That's a gesture breaking through distraction, the choice to be even in the middle of the storm. To the keeper, simply being there isn't just existing, it's caring, persisting, refusing to leave himself behind. While the rain marks the flow of time, he marks his presence. While time washes everything away, he keeps a center that won't dissolve. That's the beauty of the light. It doesn't fight time, it just shines in the present, and that alone is eternal. Rain goes on, time goes on, but in the middle of it all, a tower glows, a presence stays. A man who doesn't try to stop the rain, only to shine more brightly than it. Solitude, not as suffering, but as strength. The lighthouse keeper is alone, not by chance, not once in a while, but by a deeper choice. He lives where nobody else wanted to stay, in a tower everyone thinks is forgotten, spending nights in absolute silence. No voices, no crowds, no distractions. For most people, that would be unbearable, a punishment, an emptiness they couldn't endure. But for him, it's freedom, clarity, strength. In Stoicism, solitude isn't an escape. It's a kind of inner excavation, a laboratory for the soul, a space where you can finally hear what the noisy world drowns out. Marcus Aurelius said, "Retire into yourself. Within the soul is the source of virtue." That's what the lighthouse keeper does. He withdraws, and there, away from everything, he's more complete than he ever was in a crowd. Solitude doesn't weaken or sadden him. It reveals him. He doesn't rely on company to exist. He's sufficient in his watchfulness, in his silent ritual, in his loyalty to something that goes beyond words. Being alone isn't being empty, it's being full of yourself. In the lighthouse, every wall echoes his presence. Every step is a reminder that he walks on his own 2 feet. No hurry, no pressure, no performance. Epictetus said, "Freedom begins when you stop wanting the world to fill you up." He doesn't want that anymore, because he knows real strength doesn't come from company. It comes from integrity. Being alone gave him room to listen, to think, to breathe, to decide. Solitude taught him that everything he once sought from others, he first needed to find in himself. The tower is silent, the night is deep, but he isn't lost. He's present, he's whole, and in that solitude, there's more fortress than many find in their busy crowds. When persistence becomes a silent prayer, some prayers don't use words. They don't ask for anything. They don't beg. They don't wait for a reply. They're prayers made with hands, with feet, with steady breaths, with actions repeated day after day. That's what the lighthouse keeper does. He doesn't pray out loud, but his persistence is a kind of prayer. Every night he walks the same steps, lights the same light, follows the same ritual. By doing so, he's quietly telling the universe, I'm still here. I haven't forgotten who I am. This act still matters. In Stoicism, you don't need a temple. Your real temple is a trained mind, a steady stance, a soul that matches its values. Epictetus said, a wise person's prayer isn't for advantage, but for wisdom, not for a change in circumstances, but for right action. And the lighthouse keeper acts regularly, with care, with a patience that doesn't require a response. This repeated persistence, carried out with reverence, isn't just habit anymore. It's transformed. It's become a silent prayer, a conversation that doesn't ask for answers, because the answer is the act itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, never stop doing good even if no one sees, for good in itself is already the reward. His persistence is how he aligns with something bigger than himself, not bigger in a religious sense, but bigger in a spiritual sense, belonging to what's right, even without applause. He doesn't repeat mechanically. He repeats because he understands that mindful repetition is prayer in motion. So every night, as the tower glows and the sea sleeps, the lighthouse keeper performs his quiet devotion. He lights, he watches, he remains. No one hears his voice, but his presence is an ancient hymn, echoing in the stone, in the flame, in time. And in that persistence, there's more faith than in many hurried words. Memory as the fuel for purpose. The tower is old. Its walls hold stories no one remembers, but the keeper remembers, and that's why he stays. Not out of need, not for a function, but for memory. Every step he climbs was once climbed by his father. Every lens he cleans was once touched by ancestors. Every time the light spins, he hears echoes of voices, gestures, and stares from the past. Memory for him isn't nostalgia, it's direction. It reminds him why he started. It keeps him going when he's tired. It renews his sense of meaning when discouragement looms. In Stoicism, the past isn't idolized, but recognized as a source of learning and loyalty. Marcus Aurelius often remembered the people who shaped him, the gestures he watched, the words that guided him. All that I am, I owe to those who came before me with integrity. It's my responsibility not to break that chain. The lighthouse keeper feels the same. He keeps the light on because he knows if he stops, those memories fade with him. And there's something sacred about keeping a memory alive through your own body. Every night, his persistence is an homage, a silent ceremony of continuity, because memory is fuel. It warms your resolve when the present is fragile. It links past and present with meaning, and that meaning he'll never abandon. Epictetus said, "Remember who taught you virtue, and let your life be an extension of their lesson." That's how the keeper lives. Light on, not just out of habit, but out of loyalty to a legacy. The tower is his inheritance, lighting it, his signature. His steadiness, his way of saying, "I remember, and so shall I continue," even if the sea forgets the names, even if the world changes course, someone here still remembers, and that memory is his strength. The war ended, but the lighthouse keeper still lights it. Why? The war ended. Ships returned, then they stopped, then disappeared. The port went silent. Patrols stopped. No more messages came. But the lighthouse keeper, he kept going. Every night without fail. He climbed the tower, lit the lamp, checked the horizon, even with the war over, even when nobody needed it, even though the world had moved on. Why? Because he understood a truth few people ever reach. The end of a war isn't the end of vigilance. It's easy to stay alert when danger's at your door. Harder to remain awake when peace makes you complacent. In Stoicism, spiritual vigilance is constant. It doesn't hinge on chaos. It's a natural duty, not an emergency measure. Marcus Aurelius said, "Even when everything is calm, keep your mind prepared, because the storm can always return." But the keeper doesn't keep watch out of fear that war will come back. He keeps watch because the gesture became more than its original purpose. At first he rushed up the tower to protect, then to do his job. Now he does it to stay true to himself. The war is over, but it left behind invisible marks. The biggest mark was discipline. He learned that some acts remain essential even when they're no longer necessary. He lights the lamp as a way of honoring history, as a way of upholding a forgotten tradition, as a way of saying, even in peace, we still need vigilance. Epictetus said, "Don't live based on what's happening outside. Live based on what's happening inside." External peace may lull others to sleep, but he chooses to stay awake. He knows the greatest war isn't always visible. It's between comfort and fidelity, between rest and abandonment, between having no threats and then giving up discipline. The war ended, but he still climbs. That daily, silent, ritual climb is the deepest victory a man can have, not losing himself just because the battle's done, living without an audience as proof of character. No one's watching him, no one applauds, no one records his steps, yet he climbs. No audience, no prestige, no expectation of recognition. That's exactly why his act has such value. These days, almost everything we do is in front of a camera or posted online. So many actions come with a desire to be seen, validated, celebrated. But the lighthouse keeper, he lives without a crowd, and that's precisely what makes him strong. In Stoicism, true character isn't revealed under the spotlight. It's revealed when no one's there. Epictetus said, "If you want to know who a man really is, watch what he does when he's alone and has nothing to prove." The keeper has no one to impress. Yet every day he does his duty with exactness, precision, dedication. That's not stiffness. It's integrity. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Live so that even in private you can be proud of what you're doing." That's exactly what he does. The tower is empty, the path to it foggy. No ships go by, no newspapers mention him. But he does his job. He learned that true worth doesn't depend on an audience. Real worth is woven from the alignment of what you believe and what you do. That alignment is rare and because of that precious. He's like a monk of action, an invisible man but unbreakable. His only audience? His own conscience. If that conscience is at peace with him, the world's silence doesn't matter. Rain taps at the tower windows. A hush fills the halls, but there's a man there, doing what must be done. And that, without applause, it may be the purest proof of character a person can offer time. The beauty of endless repetition. Every day, the same path, the same stairs, the same lamp lighting, the same lens rotation, the same bench, the same silence. And yet, nothing is really the same. The lighthouse keeper knows there's a unique beauty that only repetition reveals. Not dead, automatic repetition, but repetition carried out with presence, intention, reverence. In today's world, everything chases novelty, speed, instant gratification. But he embraces the returning gesture, the cycling routine, the act that comes back around. And the more he repeats, the more he senses. The act doesn't grow old, it grows deeper. Each time he lights the lamp, something in him is different. A new thought, a deeper silence, a sharper sense of peace. In Stoicism, we call that daily practice, not for novelty, but to build solidity, to root the soul in simple pillars. Marcus Aurelius said, "There's no progress without repetition. The soul is formed by the habit of repeatedly doing what's right." The beauty of repetition is in how it carves character, how discipline creates depth, how an act becomes identity. The lighthouse keeper doesn't need variety. He found in repetition a kind of transcendence. Epictetus taught it's not about doing something new every day, but doing the same things every day with renewed awareness. That's what the keeper practices. Repetition isn't a prison. It's freedom mastered, a ritual built, a path walked so often it becomes a song. The light still spins as it always has. The rain still falls as it always has. The man still climbs as he always has. Yet there's something in the air that tells us, for all the repetition, it's beautiful, because it's genuine, because it remains, because it grows deeper. Invisible resistance against abandonment. Everything around him got left behind. Moss covered the streets of the village. The pier rotted bit by bit. Windows were boarded up. Names got lost to time. Abandonment took over, but not at the tower, not at the lamp, not at the hands that kept them going, because the lighthouse keeper realized not everything has to be swept away by time. Some things deserve a stand, and he stood his ground. He didn't fight with weapons, didn't give speeches, but with a gesture, climbing, lighting, persisting. While everything else gave up, he kept a presence alive. In Stoicism, resistance doesn't mean confronting the world violently. It means refusing to yield inside when everything outside gives way. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What is strong remains. not through force, but by deciding not to disappear. He decided not to vanish, even though the place was emptied, even though people said, "Let it go. It's not worth it anymore. No one needs it." He knew some values only survive because someone decided not to abandon them. And that choice, quiet, unpublicized, is the purest form of resistance. He became a barrier to oblivion, a living wall against symbolic collapse. Epictetus said, "Even if no one else believes, stay loyal to what's just." Truth doesn't rely on the majority. He lives that, which gives every one of his actions more weight than mere function. They carry spirit, memory, and meaning. It's not just about keeping a lighthouse going, but preventing something else from disappearing forever. Abandonment covers everything like fog, but inside the tower there's a flame and a man, and in him a decision. I won't go dark. That's enough. When the value isn't in what you do, but why you do it, light a lamp. Spin it. Wait. A simple gesture, repeated, almost insignificant from an outside view. But the lighthouse keeper knows it's not the action itself that matters most. It's the reason behind it. In our world, a lot of big actions can come from small motives. Status, vanity, fear, competition. Very few do small things for big reasons. The lighthouse keeper is one of those. Each night, he repeats a modest action, but behind it is something huge: coherence, memory, loyalty, honor. In Stoicism, the worth of an action isn't in its effect, but in the intention fueling it. Epictetus said, "It's not the size of what you do, but the spirit in which you do it that reveals your character." And the keeper does it with a pure spirit, even if no one sees, even if it helps no one, even if it seems pointless. He's not measuring impact, he's sustaining meaning. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Act so that what you do is worthy of you, not the applause of others." That's exactly it. He does what he does because it matches who he decided to be. And that transforms a technical chore into a symbolic act, a routine into a ritual, the ordinary into the sacred. It doesn't matter what you do if your reason is noble. It doesn't matter how small the gesture, if it carries a value bigger than itself. That's the essence of the light spinning in the tower. It says without words, "I do this not because it's needed, but because it's true." Outside, the world moves at high speed. Inside, this man moves with purpose. And that's what turns a common gesture into an invisible pillar holding up everything that still matters. The lit lighthouse as a metaphor for a wakeful mind. The light at the top of the lighthouse cuts through the night, turning slowly like an eye that never shuts, accompanying the darkness, but not consumed by it, staying lit, steady, centered. That's what a truly wakeful mind looks like. Over time, the lighthouse keeper realized that the beacon he lit each night wasn't just for the ocean. It stood for something greater, inner watchfulness. In Stoicism, keeping your mind awake is more than just not sleeping. It's living with alertness, with an eye on your own thoughts, resisting distractions and passive drift. Marcus Aurelius said, "The soul darkens not because of the world, but because of itself." Keep your light clear and turning. The lighthouse is a living picture of that ever-watchful mind. Even when surroundings are dark, it keeps shining. It's ready before trouble comes. It's not just for emergencies, it's the permanent state of preparedness. Epictetus taught, never lose grip on your own mind, not for a moment. That's where everything begins. The keeper cares for his mind the way he cares for the beacon. He adjusts, rotates, maintains it, doesn't let it go out by neglect. A wakeful mind is an inner lighthouse. It illuminates decisions, prevents moral shipwrecks, scatters illusions, reminds you constantly of what's important. It's not about overthinking, it's about clarity. It's about being present, not drifting on autopilot, not dozing off with open eyes. The lighthouse's light doesn't go out because the keeper decided not to sleep inside. While the sea is dark, the sky heavy, and the world distracted, there's a beam of light that turns. And in that slow rotation lives the man who realized the greatest light is a mind that never stops shining. The last light at the end of the world, and it still shines. Imagine the quiet sound of rain tapping softly, a low hum of wind in the background. The voice is gentle, as if closing a book in low tones. Picture the end of the world, not with explosions, not with screams, but with silence. Picture empty cities, moss-covered roads, forgotten names, memories evaporated. And there, in the midst of it, a tower, tall, lonely, standing against time. Inside it, an old man, steady, wide awake. Step by step he climbs, and he lights the lamp. No ships pass, no one's there to see. Still, he lights it, because it's the last light, and it still shines. In Stoicism, the end of the external world doesn't have to be the end of our inner world, because a person who lives by virtue lives beyond circumstances. Marcus Aurelius said, even if everything collapses, in you still remains what chose to do good. The lighthouse keeper is that part that remains. He's the final point that refuses to go dark. He's that subtle glow in the emptiness, the symbol that some lights don't exist for others. They exist to prove there's still meaning. Even when everything goes dark, if there's a light, there's resistance, there's remembrance, there's loyalty. Epictetus said, the world may crumble, but the steadfast soul won't crumble with it. And there, high in the tower, as the rain kisses the stone, a lamp still burns. It spins, it spins, it spins, not for usefulness, but for significance, not by order, but by decision. Because even if everything else is gone, the last light still won't fade. It resists telling the silence, I'm still here. And maybe that's enough. If you've made it this far, it's because something in you also refuses to go dark. May that light, no matter how small, how solitary, keep turning inside you. And when the night is long, remember, it's not the darkness that sets the path, it's the light you choose to keep burning. Good night, Sentinel. Sleep in peace and wake up even more whole.